Have you ever wondered how much peace you're losing just by talking too much? Every word you say shapes how others see you, but more importantly, it shapes how you see yourself. And in a world that rewards overexposure, where people share every detail of their lives for likes, attention, or validation, there's a quiet rebellion in keeping things to yourself. Not everything needs to be explained. Not every emotion needs to be announced. Not every goal needs to be declared. You are allowed to grow in silence, to suffer without turning it into a performance, to transform without narrating every step of the process. Because the more you talk, the more you dilute your power. And the more you chase external validation, the further you drift from your center. This episode is a wake-up call, a return to your inner stillness, a reminder that your words and your silence both carry energy. One can build your peace, the other can slowly tear it apart. So if you're tired of being misunderstood, if you're exhausted from oversharing, over-explaining and over-justifying, maybe it's time to take a step back, not to disconnect from the world, but to reconnect with yourself. Let's dive into 15 Stoic lessons that will teach you when to speak, when to stay silent, and how to reclaim your power, one unspoken truth at a time. 1. Keep some things to yourself. There is a quiet strength in not needing to be fully known by everyone. In an age where oversharing is normalized, where we're encouraged to post, publish and narrate every step of our journey, choosing privacy feels almost rebellious. But it's a rebellion worth embracing, because not everything you feel needs to be said. Not everything you live through needs to be shared. Some parts of your life are sacred, some wounds are still healing, and some truths gain power only when protected. The Stoics understood this. They believed in measured speech, not because they feared connection, but because they valued control. Epictetus said, "Silence is safer than speech," not because silence hides who you are, but because it honors who you are becoming. When you keep certain things to yourself, your struggles, your plans, your inner work, you create space to heal, to reflect, and to grow without interference. Think about how easily peace is disturbed when too many people know too much. The moment you open your heart to someone who isn't ready to hold it with care, you risk turning vulnerability into exposure. And once it's out there, you can't take it back. You can't control how it's used, misunderstood, or judged. But when you hold your experience close, not in fear, but in wisdom, you reclaim your power. You create a boundary between your inner life and the outer noise. Privacy isn't secrecy, it's discernment. It's the conscious choice to reveal only what strengthens connection and protects your peace. Because the more people know about you, the more they feel entitled to opinions. And opinions, when you're still figuring yourself out, can become chains. You don't owe your story to everyone. You don't need to be constantly understood, validated, or applauded. Sometimes the most powerful transformation happens in silence, when no one's watching and you're not performing. Just you, facing yourself honestly. So here's the challenge. Next time something painful or exciting happens, resist the urge to immediately share it. Sit with it. Ask yourself, does sharing this serve my growth, or is it just a reflex? You'll find that in the stillness, your thoughts become clearer, your emotions settle, and your strength grows. Because when you keep some things to yourself, you're not closing the world out. You're building a sanctuary within. 2. Your words teach others how to treat you. Have you ever noticed how the more you talk about your problems, the more people begin to see you as the problem? It's a hard truth, but an important one. The way you speak about your life, your struggles, your emotions, shapes not only how others perceive you, but how they treat you. Your words become a mirror. If all you reflect is pain, frustration, and self-doubt, people will start relating to you through that lens, even if you are so much more than what you're going through. The Stoics were masters of emotional discipline, not repression, but restraint. Seneca wrote, "Speech reveals the state of the soul." And if your speech constantly revolves around hardship, it's not just others who internalize that story. You do too. You start to believe that your pain is your identity, that your wounds define you, that your story is always heavy. But here's the shift. What if you began speaking from strength, not just suffering? What if, instead of using your words to unload pain, you used them to cultivate clarity, to process silently first, and then speak only what helps you build? This isn't about pretending you're okay when you're not. It's about choosing who you speak to, how you speak, and why. Because when you tell your story over and over again to people who can't hold it, you risk distorting it. You risk being reduced to it. Think of your words as invitations. Every time you speak, you invite people into a certain version of you. Are you inviting them into your strength or into your struggle? Are you asking for support or simply rehearsing your pain? Emotional maturity means learning how to process before you perform. It means finding stillness first, then speaking with purpose. It means sharing your truth with those who have earned your trust, not just anyone who happens to listen. So take a moment and reflect. What story are your words telling? What patterns have you created through the way you express yourself? Are you reinforcing your power or giving it away? Because the more you talk about being misunderstood, the more misunderstood you become. The more you speak only of the pain, the more that pain takes center stage. But when you speak with intention, when you share not just your wounds, but your wisdom, you change the tone of your life. And people will learn. They will learn to meet you with depth, with respect, with presence, because your words don't just tell people who you are, they teach them how to treat you. 3. Don't share every detail of your progress. Why do we feel the need to announce every step forward? Growth is sacred. It's messy, unpredictable, deeply personal, and yet we often cheapen it by putting it on display too soon. You start going to the gym, and you post a photo. You read a book, and you quote it before you finished processing it. You make a decision to change, and you rush to tell everyone before you've even lived that change long enough to embody it. But here's the thing. Talking too much about your progress can actually weaken it. It creates a false sense of accomplishment. It tricks the mind into believing the job is done, when in reality, it's only just begun. And the more people you invite into your growth, the more noise you'll have to sift through, opinions, doubts, distractions, all pulling you away from your center. The Stoics understood this deeply. They believed that true transformation speaks through action, not announcement. Epictetus reminds us, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. The key phrase here is do. Not post, not explain, just do. Because real progress is quiet. It doesn't beg to be seen. It builds strength in the background, and by the time others notice, the work is already done. You've already become. There's also a kind of pressure that comes from oversharing. The moment you tell people you're trying to change, you invite their expectations. You start performing your growth instead of living it. You feel the need to prove something, and if you stumble, which you will because growth is never linear, the fear of judgment might stop you from continuing altogether. So what if you kept your progress private, not hidden, just protected? What if you let the new version of you take shape without commentary, without outside input, without the burden of early applause? It's okay to move in silence, to build in silence, to heal in silence. Not everyone needs to know you're changing. The ones who need to know will feel it, and the ones who don't matter. So before you share that next update, ask yourself, am I sharing this because it helps me grow, or because it makes me feel seen? If it's the second, pause, breathe, go deeper. Because the most powerful progress isn't posted, it's lived, quietly, consistently, authentically. 4. Let results speak louder than words. Have you ever met someone who doesn't talk about what they're doing, but you can feel it in the way they move? There's a quiet power in people who let their results speak for them. No boasting, no constant updates, just presence, just action, just outcomes that can't be faked. And in a world addicted to telling, explaining, and oversharing, that kind of silence becomes magnetic. The Stoics believed that truth didn't need decoration, that what is real reveals itself eventually, and no amount of talk can substitute the weight of action. Seneca wrote, "What you do should speak so loudly that you don't need to say a word." The idea isn't to stay hidden forever, but to let your life become the message, not your mouth. Because here's the truth. When you talk too much about what you're doing, you often use your words to replace the discipline you haven't fully built yet. You say you're writing a book, but the pages aren't being written. You say you're healing, but the patterns keep repeating. You say you're working on yourself, but you're still waiting for applause before taking the next step. Talking becomes a trap, a performance, a way to feel rewarded before the work is done. But real power comes when you no longer need the reward. When you move in silence, not because you're hiding, but because you're focused, grounded, working. And the most beautiful part, results can't be faked. You can say anything you want, but the reality of your life will always reflect your consistency, your effort, and your truth. No caption can override your habits. No post can disguise your energy. Sooner or later, the results speak, and they speak clearly. This isn't about being cold or mysterious. It's about being honest. Do you want to be seen for what you say, or respected for what you do? So take the energy you've been putting into explaining yourself and redirect it into building, creating, becoming. Every moment you spend defending your path is a moment you're not walking it. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. Let your growth speak. Let your peace speak. Let your evolution do the talking. And when people notice, and they will, you won't have to say a word. 5. Start changing the story. You tell yourself. What if the loudest voice sabotaging your peace was your own? We often talk about how other people hurt us, how they doubt us, dismiss us, or disrespect us. But rarely do we look inward and ask, how do I speak to myself when no one's listening? Because the story you tell yourself when you're alone becomes the reality you live in. And if that story is filled with regret, shame, or self-doubt, then no external praise will ever be enough to set you free. The Stoics believed that perception is everything. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." What you tell yourself over and over again becomes you. If you say you're broken, you live small. If you say you're not enough, you play it safe. If you say the past defines you, you never move beyond it. But here's the truth. Your story is not fixed. It's not carved in stone. It's a script, and you are both the author and the narrator. You can revise it, rewrite it, change its direction. Not by pretending the past didn't happen, but by choosing how you carry it. Let go of phrases like, "I always mess things up," or "nothing ever works for me." These aren't facts. They're scars disguised as beliefs. And the more you repeat them, the deeper they sink into your identity. It's time to challenge them. Gently, consistently. Not with empty affirmations, but with new evidence, small wins, better choices, fresh perspectives. It starts with awareness. Catch the story as it rises. When you hear yourself saying, "I can't," pause and ask, is that true or just familiar? When you think, "People always leave me," ask, am I seeing reality or repeating a fear? These questions are the first cracks in the old narrative, and through those cracks, light gets in. Because once you change the way you speak to yourself, everything shifts. You stop chasing validation. You stop expecting others to repair wounds they didn't create. You stop living in the past and start writing a future worth believing in. So what story are you telling yourself right now? And more importantly, is it helping you grow or keeping you small? You have the power to speak differently, even if no one else does. You can be the voice that lifts instead of tears down, and that single choice might be the beginning of your greatest transformation. 6. Speak less. Think more. Have you ever said something you didn't truly mean, just because you didn't take a breath before responding? Words are powerful. They can build connection or destroy it, heal wounds or deepen them, create peace or set fire to it. And yet, most of us speak from impulse, not intention. We rush to fill silence, defend ourselves, prove a point, or avoid discomfort. But every time you speak without thinking, you give away a piece of your control, and the cost is often higher than you realize. The Stoics practiced restraint not because they feared expression, but because they respected it. They believed that real wisdom isn't shown in how much you say, but in how clearly and when you choose to say it. Epictetus taught, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." And there's profound power in that ratio. Speaking less doesn't mean becoming passive. It means becoming deliberate. It means pausing before you react, questioning your motives before you speak, and asking, is this true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? If the answer isn't clear, maybe the silence is more honest than the words would be. Because here's what happens when you speak less. Your words gain weight. People listen more closely. You create space for reflection, both for yourself and others. You begin to notice things, tone, body language, subtle shifts in energy that would have been drowned out by constant talking. And most importantly, you learn to respond instead of react. Think about how often arguments, misunderstandings, or regrets come from saying too much too fast. One careless phrase, one defensive outburst, one sarcastic comment, and the damage is done. But when you practice restraint, when you let the moment breathe before speaking into it, you change the outcome. You protect your peace and preserve your relationships. And this applies to internal dialogue too. When your thoughts spiral, when the mind fills with noise, practice the same pause. Speak less, think more. Observe your thinking like clouds passing in the sky, without grabbing onto every one. Clarity lives on the other side of stillness. So try this. The next time you feel the urge to explain, defend, or rush into words, stop, count to 5, breathe, and ask yourself, does this need to be said, or do I just need to feel heard? The more you master this pause, the more powerful your presence becomes, because a wise person speaks, not to fill silence, but to bring meaning to it. 7. Use silence to stay calm and centered. Have you ever noticed how silence can feel louder than words? It's in the pause between breaths, the space between thoughts, the moments when the world goes quiet, and suddenly you can hear yourself again. Not the voice you use to perform, impress, or defend, but the deeper one, the one that simply knows. In Stoic philosophy, silence isn't emptiness, it's clarity. It's the space where wisdom grows, where emotions are observed, not acted upon, where the ego quiets down and the soul steps forward. Marcus Aurelius lived this truth when he wrote, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength. And calm cannot exist without silence, but we're afraid of silence. We try to fill it with noise, conversations, music, distractions. We fear what might rise in its absence, discomfort, anxiety, old pain. So we run from it, not realizing that silence isn't the enemy. It's the mirror. It shows us what's really there, beneath the surface." Using silence to stay centered isn't about avoiding life. It's about stepping out of reactivity. When you choose silence in a moment of tension, you create space for clarity. When you choose silence in the middle of chaos, you create space for stability. You're no longer pulled into every emotional wave. You become the ocean beneath them. This kind of silence isn't cold or distant. It's composed. It's the calm in the eye of the storm. And when others are yelling, reacting, demanding, your stillness becomes a force they can't shake. It unsettles the reactive. It empowers the mindful. But like any discipline, it takes practice. Start small. The next time you feel overwhelmed, resist the urge to vent immediately. Sit with the feeling. Let it pass through you without needing to put it into words. Let silence do what words cannot. Soothe, center, restore. And in your daily life, build silent rituals. A few minutes each morning without your phone. A quiet walk. Deep breathing before you speak. These aren't luxuries, they're tools. Tools that sharpen your awareness and bring you back to yourself. Because silence doesn't mean nothing is happening. Often, it's when the most important shifts are taking place. Quietly, invisibly, powerfully. So trust the stillness. Protect it. Return to it often. Because in a noisy world, silence is not weakness. It's a superpower. 8. Protect your deepest fears. Who do you trust with your unspoken fears? It's a question that cuts deep, because too often we hand over our most vulnerable truths to people who haven't earned the right to hold them. We open up quickly, hoping to feel understood, only to walk away feeling exposed, dismissed, or judged. And that sting, it doesn't just wound us, it teaches us to fear intimacy, to mistrust others, and even worse, to mistrust ourselves. But here's the Stoic truth. Your fears are sacred, not because they define you, but because they reveal you. They uncover the softest parts of who you are, the wounds, the doubts, the stories you carry in silence. And when you share those fears too freely, without discernment, you give people access to your most delicate layers, layers they may not know how to handle. Seneca wrote, "No man was ever wise by chance," and wisdom includes knowing the weight of your words, especially the ones spoken in vulnerability. Not everyone deserves your inner world. Not everyone can meet your depth with care, and not everyone will see your fear as something human. Some will see it as weakness, some will use it to control, and some will simply not understand and unintentionally break what you've worked hard to protect. This doesn't mean close yourself off. It means be selective. Share with those who have earned your trust over time. not just those who seem safe in the moment. Build your inner circle slowly and keep your most tender truths in the hands of those who show you they can hold them with respect, not reaction. And perhaps even more importantly, learn to sit with your own fears first, before rushing to share them. When you process in solitude, you give yourself space to understand the root of what you're feeling. You begin to realize that not all fears need fixing. Some just need presence. Some just need you, steady, compassionate, patient. Because when you become your own safe space, you stop giving that responsibility to others. You share because you choose to, not because you need to. And that shift changes everything. So the next time you feel the urge to share your deepest fear, ask yourself, is this person capable of holding this truth with care? Or am I seeking comfort where there is no capacity? Your inner world is not a stage. Treat it like a sacred place, because that's exactly what it is. 9. Talking too much about your goals can kill your drive. Have you ever felt proud just from saying what you're going to do before actually doing it? It's more common than you think. You set a goal to change, to build, to become, and your first instinct is to announce it. You tell your friends, your followers, your family, and for a moment, it feels good. You feel accomplished, seen, supported. But that feeling, it's a trick, a reward you haven't earned yet. And too often, it steals the hunger that was meant to fuel your journey. The Stoics warned against this illusion. Epictetus taught, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. The moment you talk too much about your vision, you risk mistaking words for action. You feel like you've taken a step forward, when in truth, you've just drained momentum. This isn't about hiding your goals. It's about protecting them from unnecessary exposure. Because every time you speak about your ambition, your mind releases dopamine, the same chemical it releases when you actually achieve something. It feels like progress, but it's not. It's just performance. And the danger is real. The more you talk, the less you need to act, because your brain already thinks you've arrived. Think about the people you admire most, the ones who move quietly, who don't explain, who just show up again and again, building what matters in the dark, until the results become undeniable. Their power comes from restraint, from knowing that real growth is internal first, visible second. So the next time you set a goal, try something different. Keep it to yourself. Let the early phase be sacred, a private contract between you and your future self. No applause, no validation, just discipline. Let your energy go into execution, not explanation. Let your effort speak before your voice does, and trust that the results will say more than any announcement ever could, because there's a strength in restraint, in choosing not to perform, not because you doubt yourself, but because you're already on the path. And that path doesn't need an audience, it needs action. 10. Be a good listener, not just a talker. When was the last time you listened, truly listened, without waiting to reply? Most conversations today aren't really conversations. They're overlapping monologues, two people talking, but neither fully hearing, each one waiting for their turn, preparing their next point, defending their ego, or trying to impress. And in that noise, the connection, the real human connection, quietly dies. The Stoics understood the value of listening, not just as a social skill, but as a form of wisdom. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, believed that silence and listening were foundations of a disciplined mind. And Epictetus reminded us, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason." The message is simple. Listen more than you speak, and you will learn more than you expect. Listening isn't passive. It's an act of presence. It's a moment where you lay down your need to be right, to be seen, or to be heard, and instead you offer space. Space for someone else to unfold, to feel understood, to be met with attention instead of interruption. And here's the paradox. The less you speak, the more others reveal. In your stillness, people feel safe. They open up. They speak truths they didn't even know they were holding. And you begin to understand more about people, about life, and even about yourself, simply by receiving rather than reacting. But being a good listener doesn't just serve others, it disciplines your own mind. It forces you to slow down, to hold back impulsive reactions, to resist the urge to correct, fix, or control the narrative. In that pause, something powerful happens. Your emotional intelligence sharpens, your perspective widens, your patience grows. Listening teaches humility. It reminds you that your voice doesn't always need to lead, that your wisdom doesn't lose value in silence, that sometimes the most intelligent response is no response at all. So in your next conversation, try this. Stop preparing your answer while the other person is speaking. Look at them. Feel what they're really saying. Let their words land, not on your ego, but on your awareness. Because the world doesn't need more talkers. It needs people who know how to witness, how to hold space, how to hear between the lines. And when you become one of them, something beautiful unfolds. You speak less, you understand more. And when you finally do speak, your words carry weight. 11. Think before you speak. How many times have you regretted words that felt right in the moment, but left damage in their wake? It's one of the most human mistakes. Speaking from emotion, from impulse, from the need to be heard, or to defend ourselves before we've had a chance to reflect. And once the words are out, they can't be pulled back. You can apologize, you can explain, but the echo of those words lingers. In the room, in the relationship, in your own mind. The Stoics warned us about this. They understood that speech is an action, and like any action, it carries consequences. Seneca said, "Speech is the mirror of the mind. What you say reflects how clearly or how chaotically you are thinking. If your mind is stormy, your words will be reckless. But if your mind is calm, your words will reflect that steadiness." Thinking before you speak doesn't mean overthinking. It means pausing. It means recognizing that your words are not just sounds, they're tools. They can build trust, restore peace, set boundaries, or shatter all three. And in high-stress moments, that pause can make the difference between creating connection and creating damage. But here's what makes it hard. When emotions are high, logic feels far away. Anger wants to speak, pride wants to defend, fear wants to explain. But none of those voices are grounded. None of them serve your higher self. That's why the Stoics practiced self-control in conversation, not to appear stoic in the modern sense, cold or detached, but to preserve their peace and protect the integrity of their relationships. So how do you think before you speak? You breathe, you buy yourself time, you feel the urge to react, and then you don't. You wait, even just a few seconds. You ask yourself, what am I trying to accomplish with this response? Is this coming from my values or my wounds? This kind of mindfulness turns speech into a craft. You become deliberate, measured. You realize you don't need to say everything that comes to mind. You don't need to correct every mistake, argue every point, or defend every emotion. Your silence isn't submission, it's strength. Your restraint isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And over time, people begin to notice. They feel safer around you. They listen more carefully. And when you speak, they take your words seriously. Because you've shown that you don't speak lightly, that your voice carries intention, not impulse. So the next time you're about to reply, especially when emotions are high, pause, think, and then decide, will these words help or harm? Do they reflect who I am or just how I feel right now? Because when you master your words, you begin to master your life. 12. Stop needing approval from others. Why do we keep handing our peace to people who don't even know who we are? From a young age, we're conditioned to seek approval from parents, teachers, peers, strangers. We're taught to value praise, to fear rejection, to adjust who we are based on how others respond. And little by little, we begin to build our identity not from within, but from the outside in. But here's the cost. When your sense of worth depends on approval, you become a prisoner to other people's opinions. Your peace becomes fragile. Your confidence starts to fluctuate, and you lose the most important relationship you'll ever have, the one you have with yourself. The Stoics warned us about this trap. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." That paradox is the root of so much inner conflict. We long to feel free, but we keep asking others for permission. And the truth is, no amount of external approval will ever satisfy an internal void. Even when people praise you, it's temporary. The high fades. You start needing the next compliment, the next like, the next nod of validation. It becomes an addiction, subtle but exhausting. So how do you stop needing approval? You begin by noticing the craving, that moment when you hesitate to post something because you're afraid it won't be liked, when you silence your opinion to avoid judgment, when you say yes just to be accepted. These are the moments where your power leaks, where you trade your truth for comfort. The Stoic solution isn't to stop caring entirely. It's to care correctly. It's to place your highest value not on what others think, but on how aligned your actions are with your principles. It's to measure your self-worth not by applause, but by integrity. Because here's the liberating truth. You don't need to be understood to be worthy. You don't need to be liked to be enough. The people who truly see you, who matter, will not require you to shrink, to shift, or to perform. They will honor your presence as you are. So ask yourself, whose voice matters most in my life, and why have I placed their opinion above my own inner knowing? Then begin the shift, gently, consistently, back to your own center. Speak because you have something real to say, not because you want to be approved. Act because it feels right, not because you want to impress. Be who you are, even if it means being misunderstood. Because the moment you stop needing approval, you start living in alignment. 13. Be careful who you share your plans with. Have you ever shared a dream with someone, only to walk away feeling smaller? It's a subtle kind of betrayal, not always intentional, but just as damaging. You open your heart, reveal your vision, speak your hopes out loud, and instead of encouragement, you're met with doubt, mockery, or subtle indifference. It stings, and that sting doesn't just affect how you feel, it affects what you do. Suddenly, you question the idea. You hesitate, you stall, not because it wasn't worth pursuing, but because you gave it to someone who couldn't see what you saw. The Stoics were deeply aware of how easily external influence can disrupt internal clarity. Epictetus warned, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Not everyone will understand your plans. Not everyone is supposed to. But if you're not careful about who you share them with, you may lose the courage to act before you even begin." Dreams are delicate in their early stages. Before they take form, they live in the imagination, a place easily shaken by criticism. And when you speak them too soon, to the wrong people, you expose that fragile energy to forces that can distort, discourage, or even destroy it. So the wisdom is simple. Protect your plans like seeds. Don't dig them up too early to show the world. Let them take root in silence. Nourish them with action. Water them with discipline. And when they grow strong enough to stand on their own, then they'll be ready to be seen. This isn't about secrecy, it's about discernment. Not every listener is a supporter. Some people project their fears onto you, others feel threatened by your growth, and many, without meaning to, will dilute your vision simply because they lack vision themselves. So ask yourself, does this person truly want to see me win, or do they just want to feel comfortable with who I've always been? That question alone can save you years of delayed progress. And remember, some of your biggest moves will have to be made in silence, not because you're hiding, but because you're focused, not because you don't trust anyone, but because you trust yourself first. So the next time you're tempted to share your plan, pause. Ask, does this need to be said, or does it need to be built? Because once the result is real, you won't have to convince anyone. 14. Remember, silence is a form of power. In a world that screams for attention, the one who remains silent holds a different kind of authority. We're taught to speak up, speak out, speak often, as if silence equals weakness, passivity, or fear. But the truth is, silence can be one of the most powerful responses available to you, not because it hides your truth, but because it reveals your control. When you choose silence intentionally, not out of fear, but out of presence, you reclaim the space between stimulus and response. You protect your peace. You shift the balance of energy in any room. The Stoics knew this well. They practiced silence not as withdrawal, but as discipline. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The more we value things outside our control, the less control we have." And nowhere is that more visible than in conversation. When the pressure to respond, to defend, to prove ourselves takes over. But silence interrupts that cycle. It invites stillness, and in stillness, power is restored. When someone provokes you and you respond with silence, you disarm them. You remove the fuel from their fire. You show that your peace is not up for negotiation, and that unsettles people who expect chaos. Silence becomes a boundary, one that says, "I'm not available for this energy." But silence isn't just for conflict. It's also where your inner voice grows louder. When you stop constantly filling the space with noise, digital, emotional, conversational, something sacred happens. Your instincts sharpen. Your clarity returns. You begin to hear the wisdom that's been drowned out by distractions, and you realize the answers were never outside of you. We often think of power as loud, forceful, obvious, but some of the strongest people you'll ever meet are the quiet ones, not because they have nothing to say, but because they know when saying nothing says more. So use silence with intention, as a filter, as protection, as a weapon of peace. You don't need to engage every battle. You don't need to fill every pause. You don't need to prove your strength with volume. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply not respond, because silence isn't empty, it's focused. And that focus, That's where your power lives. 15. Change your inner dialogue. Change your life. What if the way you speak to yourself is the reason you're still stuck? We often look outside for change, new routines, new habits, new opportunities, but the most transformative shift doesn't begin out there. It starts in here, in the language you use inside your own mind, because your inner dialogue becomes the script for your entire life. And if that script is filled with doubt, criticism, fear, or shame, no amount of external success will ever bring peace. The Stoics knew that mastery begins within. Marcus Aurelius constantly wrote to himself, not because he was lost, but because he understood the power of internal language. Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself. That within includes the way you narrate your experiences, your challenges, your worth. Your thoughts are not just passing clouds. They are architects. They shape how you perceive the world, how you react to stress, how you interpret failure. And the most dangerous part, you get used to them. You hear the same negative phrases, "I'm not good enough," "I always fail," "This is who I am." And eventually they feel like truth. But they're not truth, they're habits, and habits can be broken. So how do you change your inner dialogue? You start by listening, really listening. Notice the words you use when you make a mistake. Are you cruel to yourself? Dismissive? Do you say things to yourself that you'd never say to someone you love? That's your signal. That's where the work begins. From there, you shift, not with fake positivity or empty affirmations, but with honesty, with strength. Replace "I'm a failure" with "I'm learning." Replace "I can't do this" with "I haven't figured it out yet." Replace "I always mess things up" with "I'm working on doing better." These are not lies, they're bridges. Bridges between who you were and who you're becoming. And here's what's powerful. The more you practice this new voice, the more natural it becomes. Over time, your mind stops being a battlefield and becomes a refuge. You begin to trust yourself again, to root for yourself instead of sabotaging your every step, because the truth is, no one hears you more than you. And if your own voice is not on your side, it's hard to win anything else. So today, become aware. Speak differently, to yourself, for yourself. Because once you change the way you talk to yourself, you'll start changing what you believe is possible. And that is the beginning of everything. You don't have to tell the world everything. You don't have to explain your every thought, every wound, every plan. In fact, the more you keep sacred things sacred, the more power you hold. In a culture that equates visibility with value, it takes strength to choose silence, to move in quiet, to live without constantly performing who you are. But the ones who master that silence, who learn to hold their fears with care, protect their growth, and speak only when words are rooted in wisdom, they are the ones who live with true peace. Because peace isn't found in being known by everyone. It's found in being honest with yourself and keeping what matters safe from noise. The Stoics didn't just teach philosophy, they modeled emotional self-respect, restraint, clarity. They taught us that privacy isn't secrecy, it's wisdom, that silence isn't weakness, it's presence, and that your inner world, when protected and nurtured, becomes your greatest source of strength. So if you've been feeling scattered, exposed, or misunderstood, maybe the answer isn't to say more, maybe it's to say less, but with more meaning, to protect your vision, to filter your words, to let your actions speak, and to trust that the right people will understand you, even in your quiet. If this episode gave you something to reflect on, something to feel, or something to change, I invite you to take it personally, make it yours, and most of all, begin, in silence, with intention, for no one else but you. And if you're on this path with me, searching for depth, truth, and a quieter kind of power, subscribe, share this with someone who needs it, and let's keep walking this road together. The world may be loud, but your clarity doesn't have to be.